different cases, different preferences.
Yes.
Very interesting to hear about all the services you provide and all the different products for those of the listeners who may not have checked in with you recently. It's very interesting to see that you do a lot more than just the storage. You do complete projects, and so thank you very much for sharing about this today. And we will make sure to share the contact details so anybody who's looking to move ahead with the project can get in touch with you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for the opportunity.
Very, very good. So we're now already moving to the last session of the day. And I'm very happy to be welcoming Erik. Hello, Erik. How are you doing?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, good, thank you.
Very
it's a bit
much
dark here.
Yes, it looks like it's the middle of the night where you are. Where are you?
I got a slow camera. I think that's the problem. I'm in Accra.
In Accra, in Ghana. Well, thank you very much for making the time to join us today. I'm always very pleased to invite real innovators in our events, because they are really opening the minds of the people listening in. And when we got in touch, I really wanted to have you on board for this event, because I think you're up to something very, very interesting back there in Ghana for now, and then probably expanding across the rest of Africa. Before I hand over the word to you, I'd like to give a brief word of introduction about you. You're the founder and CEO of the company called Kofa, based in Ghana, and your overarching goal is really to push the boundaries of affordable, sustainable, and future-proof electricity networks. Now, this has a lot to do, I guess, with your professional background of energy trader, working with companies like Centrica, Hudson Energy, and LifeJump. I'm not going to say anything more. I'm just going to hand over to you so that you can explain to the listeners what you are working on and what is your angle to revolutionize the electricity industry in Africa in your way.
Yeah, great. Thank you, John, for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure. Can I share slides?
You are absolutely able to share a slide. I believe I have given you the controls.
Yeah, I see it
here.
Perfect.
It's coming up now, and you can just go in presentation mode so we get your full slide on the screen. Perfect.
Is that visible? Okay. Yeah, so like I said, pleasure to be here. I think it's always good to share knowledge and learn. So I guess that's why we're all here today. So just to start, we like John said, are based out of Accra, Ghana. We're a relatively young company. We started just under 2 years ago. And what we're doing is building out a battery swapping network to provide energy access for customers across as many use cases as possible. Mobility is probably one of the dominant use cases for the network initially, but we see this expanding to many more possible productive or backup use cases as we grow and scale it. So that's it in a kind of short nutshell on what we're trying to achieve. Here's a very quick picture just to bring it a bit to life. So you can see the battery swap station there behind the lady with the orange batteries in there, and then there's a motorcycle right in front. So we tend to install these swap stations out at retail partners. They can be one unit like that with 6 batteries, or they can be many more. We currently have about 10 in Accra, and we're trying to grow this quite quickly. Now, this is probably preaching to the choir because everybody on the call is going to be aware of this. It's just for context setting and how we are looking at the world. So the big problem that we see is that you have a lot of wealth creation happening on the continent, which is driving the need for more energy. And a lot of that growth is happening in urban environments. So our position is really an urban play, not really rural. It could go there in the future, but it is about solving the issues we see in urban settings for energy access. And the thing is, with this kind of growth and these kind of needs, investments have to be made to make sure that energy can be accessed and be provided to customers. Now, in a country like Ghana, actually the energy access is quite high, but reliability is still not where it needs to be. So, and that's the case across most of sub-Saharan Africa. In some cases, energy access is quite low. In Ghana, they've done relatively well to build out the initial grid, but reliability still suffers. And it will be because of things like lacking infrastructure on the distribution network, and even down to the wiring that goes into homes and businesses not always being fit for purpose. And that presents quite a problem. So I've created a little bit of a comparison there on the right, on how reliability, accessibility, and sustainability stacks in sub-Saharan Africa versus Europe, for example. Sustainability is an interesting one. I think there's just immense potential, but at the same time, I think we have to be conscious of the fact that you do have a lot of natural resources like gas and oil that can be monetized. So there's potentially a conflict, but I think the continent will find its way through that. I think the renewables and batteries and all this will scale if it can serve the needs of customers at the right price. And clearly it's all getting there in the right direction, which I think is very exciting. But to solve this big problem that we see, we think that there is the status quo way to go about it. So governments can build out all the infrastructure, all the heavy investment into substations, power plants, distributions lines, transmission lines, but the investments there are significant and very time-consuming. And then even getting a new connection in itself is very expensive. So there has to be some kind of payback, but on these large-scale infra investments, it is a lot of money with very, very long-term paybacks. And what we think is that there has to be a better way to deal with this energy access problem. And again, in our world, this is within urban settings. We don't have to, when we have a blanker slate, not blank because you do have infrastructure already, you have a bit more of a blanker slate to rethink in entirety how we go about building out energy access in the short term, medium, and long term. And we think that this needs to be more decentralized. It needs to be more efficient. You know, the thing about a big power grid is one failure at a substation takes out an entire area. The nice thing about a more distributed network is that you can isolate these problems more discreetly. But what we see as a solution here is distributed generation we like, but also building out a distributed swappable battery network where customers can access these batteries for whatever they want in any place throughout the system. So it's a network that would link in with the grid. If the grid go down, you grab a battery. If you don't have grid access, you could pick up a battery and use it. And then hopefully that provides a bit of like a time where until we're ready to put the heavy investment into the grid, the batteries provide almost a support to the system. And once the grid is there, these batteries can act as your reserve capacity. So in most built up energy systems, large power plants sit there on spinning reserve and are only used to balance the wires when there are fluctuations in frequency or big demand drops or increases. And a distributed battery network like this could, in effect, become your reserve capacity. So it meets the needs of energy access for customers, but it also can sit and help balance the local grid itself. So it's got multitude of value, plays, and purposes. Now, this here is a little bit off the hip, but as an example, we see the kind of energy access points in these kind of buckets. So you've got your existing grid, which is generally not that reliable. It is affordable. That's the one thing. So once it's put in, electricity generally is cheap. Paybacks are very long. But it is cheap. It can be renewable, but I'd say currently in most countries, there's a lot of fossil fuel generation that pumps itself into the grid. Once you take that renewable, it does become a lot harder to balance. That's the other thing. So you either need to go build peaking plant or potentially use batteries to do it. So that's for the existing grid. New grid connections are generally expensive. I think I've seen quotes on getting meters in it anywhere from $400 to $1,000 for a new meter, even in an urban environment. That is quite punitive. But if you can afford that cash up front, then I guess you've got cheap electricity for long. But most people find it hard to pay for that up front unless you got quite a bit of money. Now on mobility, so motorcycles, fuel is definitely a reliable source. It isn't that affordable, and it's definitely not clean. Same for petrol and generators. It is reliable. Like the system works well. You can generally always go to a petrol station and get access to that fuel, but it's not affordable. It's very volatile, and it's definitely not sustainable. Now we think the battery network can be equally reliable. It is cheaper, and I'll come on to the business model a bit later, but it is cheaper than using petrol, and you can definitely make it fully sustainable by pumping in, solar or whatever other renewable sources to charge those assets. So in our, let's call it customer vision, this network is built up of portable swappable batteries that are kept on charge at stations throughout a city, and then can be used for customers to plug into a motorcycle or power a light or power a sewing machine. So in a way, to the customer, they are very much like petrol, but they're packets of energy in a box that they can take around and use to power whatever they need. That would also include powering things in a home when lights go out. So we have customers that call on batteries to go into homes when they're working at home, or they want their TV running, and they plug the batteries into an inverter and then can use it to power their equipment. The nice thing here as well with batteries versus petrol is you can digitize this system completely. So you can track the energy use everywhere down to the last points of a kilowatt. And that provides for quite a nice way to optimize the network efficiently and keep track of every last decimal point of energy in the system. In petrol, there's definitely a lot of leakage within how it gets purchased, distributed, used. That can be fully managed in a system like this. And I think the market potential here is massive. You've got just these bubbles here are fossil fuel. Most of it is petrol, some diesel, but you're talking across sub-Saharan Africa, our estimates, over 30 billion a year spent on petrol from motorcycles and backup power, plus some petrol used for actual productive use cases. Now, if all of that was used with more efficient energy, like batteries powered by solar, you could shave, depending upon country, let's say 10 to 30% off that spend straight down to customer, which is quite an amazing opportunity for all of us involved in trying to tackle and make this work. Furthermore, the CO2 reductions I don't know if this chart is that self-explanatory, but the CO2, the bubbles are value, and the CO2 reductions are on the left. So the higher you go, the more CO2. But like, removing petrol and diesel generators, we think is easily, 40, 50 million tons of CO2 a year that can be displaced. A bit less for bikes, but still quite significant. And this is an important thing. I think it's not the main driver when you're in a position of trying to create wealth and people are not fully yet there with their discretionary income. But when you can make something work economically and have the benefit of also dealing with climate change, this becomes all very positive for everybody involved. So in short, our business model is to separate out. This is for vehicles. It's a little bit similar for dealing with backup power, but I thought the vehicle is maybe a bit easier to present. So we or our partners sell the electric motorcycle to a customer, so they own it. And that does not include the battery. So the battery cost is taken away. And then customers pay to use and access the batteries. So it becomes like a battery as a service model. That means that we can compete almost directly with the alternatives on the ground today. So an electric motorcycle is not as cheap as the cheapest motorcycles on the ground, but it is also not as expensive as the most expensive ones. And I'm talking like 125 to 150 cc vehicles. So it is towards, let's say, middle to cheapest. But on the batteries, you're on vehicles saving, like I said, 10 to 30% versus fuel. In some countries, it would be higher. In Ghana, it fluctuates there depending upon where they move petrol at the pump. But it tends to sit in that area. And then inside that value proposition, you also have the ability for customers to keep track of their energy use via, let's say, a mobile app, giving them a lot more insight and control in how they use that energy. And this kind of system would be exactly the same for productive or backup power use cases, where instead of a motorcycle, you would give customers an inverter so they could plug the DC batteries in and then power all their AC loads. So very similar in concept, but I thought this is probably easier to understand. Yeah, so I think in short, that's it. I hope that provides enough of a context, and I can take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Erik. It's it does speak to me a lot, but I do have some extra questions for you, and hopefully this can also open the eyes of the listeners who may not necessarily be familiar with the amazing impact of e-mobility in Africa, especially for commercial motorbikes, because we are in a completely different market than in Europe or in the US, where it's mostly cars, private cars. Here on the continent, our mobility is mostly driven by commercial moto taxis. And you mentioned it just a few moments ago, but just to make sure that everybody understands, given the diesel or the petrol prices in different countries, people driving those electric bikes, yours, but also the bikes from other brands, are in a position to immediately save between 30 and up to 50% on their OPEX. I mean, it's quite amazing for the driver. Yeah. It's a good business for the company, and it's also a great solution for the countries that are importing this petrol and can use this money for something else, infrastructure development. So it's a really, really great thing. My first question is, so you showed the swap station. What is it powered by currently? Are you connected to the grid, or do you have your own solar panels somewhere on top? How do you power this?
So we've got some that are solar powered. That one you saw is connected straight into the local grid. We do think that all the stations would have grid tie. In the future, that would be more potentially for pumping energy back out of the stations into the grid to help balance them. So in an ideal world, you have solar to charge, and then once the batteries are charged, they can do, either provide that energy to a customer or go back into the grid to help balance the system. The nice thing in Ghana is that like I said, access and reliability is relatively good here. So charging straight off the main grid is not that problematic. We do have it, by the way, and then we have to go and swap batteries out to keep the network going. But generally speaking, it's quite okay in Ghana.
And just to have a picture of your current activities, how many such swap stations do you currently have in operation, or how many bikes, just to have an order of magnitude?
So we're still quite early. We've got about 10 stations. The last two we're just finishing them off. And we've got just under 50 bikes operating in only Accra today.
Yeah. And then, so as you explains, the first step or the first part of your project is dedicated to e-mobility, but then there is also all the residential use. How is this exactly happening? So I'm trying to picture myself in my house, and I would love to make use of your solutions. Do I need to change something in my house? Do I need to work with exclusively DC appliances that I'm also buying from you? How does it work exactly?
So we don't target houses or residential yet.
Okay.
It's predominantly micro businesses and SMEs. The slight difficulty with a home, we do it to homes, but it's not a focus area. The slight difficulty with a home is that once they take a battery, people easily leave their homes, and therefore retrieving the battery becomes difficult. Whilst in a business, they're open all working hours, so the retrieval process is just a lot simpler. So, for example, we've got one customer that sells shoes in a night market. And he is straight down in Accra, doesn't actually have grid access, and he uses our batteries to light up his stall. The most fascinating thing that he's actually done is he has also run wires from our batteries through to his neighbors and is acting like a tiny distribution network himself. So he sells energy from our battery to his neighbors' stalls. So in this market, we light up like, I don't know what it is, 10, 15 stalls, and it lasts like 6-7 hours through the night. They close at like 11, start at like 5, 6. Yeah.
But coming back to my original question, maybe I wasn't clear. Like, does it require any special kind of equipment to connect to your unit, or is just like putting in some cables or plug, or how does it work?
Yeah. I wish I could show you a picture, actually. It's just an inverter. So it's a small box that you plug into the battery that then converts that DC to AC and does the voltage change. And then you can plug any normal equipment like you would do into your wall. So there's no need to retrofit everything. We've had the batteries also connect straight into changeover switches in small markets. So when the lights go off, it automatically comes on. But it is done via an inverter system. Yeah.
We have a question from Maxwell, who thanks you for your presentation, but wonders, how do you ensure that the security how do you ensure the security of the battery and that it's not being tampered with?
Yeah,
because people take your product with them somewhere else. How do you ensure this?
It's a question that I don't actually have enough. We haven't built enough experience here to have true good answers. So this is theoretical. All our batteries are connected to the cloud. So if batteries get out of our network when they shouldn't be, and that could be geofencing or where we haven't been able to get it back and we know it shouldn't be somewhere, whatever, we can turn the batteries off. So that's one thing. Also in urban areas, they are potentially easier to go and retrieve than they would be in rural areas where you'd need to disperse collection teams. Now, that doesn't mean that people still won't break into the batteries to try and, I don't know, scrap value or find other ways to hack it. And that time will tell. The one thing we feel is because these batteries are being used for like productive use cases, like a motorcycle for a delivery guy to make money, or a business owner that needs it to power his store, it is a very high value proposition to them. And naturally, they will care to keep that there so that they can still get it the next time. So we believe that there will be an approach by users to take better care. It's not a nicety. It's something that drives value, real value for them. It's not a nice to have. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Plus, correct me if I'm wrong, but those batteries can only be charged at your chargers. They cannot be charged somewhere else. So there's this relationship between the batteries and the charger.
Yeah. So the BMS speaks to the charger or to the bike or to the inverter. And if it doesn't identify that inverter or that bike, it won't work. But the wonderful thing here is that there are, I don't know if you guys know MacGyver, but like they are everywhere, highly entrepreneurial, highly risk-taking, and people will find ways. I don't think we can assume they won't find ways. So, we got to be prepared for it. Yeah.
I'm having another question here. I hope I'm pronouncing the first name well. Vutsumuzi. How do you balance the battery charge rate and the swap rate, especially during peak hours?
So the main, let's say, limiting factor for this to work is the reserve ratio of the batteries in the system, which I think is what you're asking. So reliability and price are the two most important things to the customer. It needs to always be available when they turn up at a station, and it needs to be cheaper than petrol. We see that as the short-term absolute requirement. But at the same time, I can solve reliability by putting a lot of batteries out there, and then it kind of works, but it's not economical as a business model. So right now we're on first generation products, so it's a little bit manual, but we track states of charge across every station in our network in real time. We do that today. And we already know which stations tends to have peak demand earlier than others or what times of day. So we can see that data and we can give rough predictions on where these peaks hit. When we then see that a station is lacking the amount of charged batteries, currently we literally move batteries between stations. It's not fully economical because you now have a transport cost between each of the stations. But with our new products that we're working on, which hopefully if you guys are following us, you will see more of in the coming months. We should be able to, instead of move batteries ourselves, incentivize customers to move to the next nearest station and potentially deliver a discount to them. So it becomes a proactive optimization, trying to, again, drive value to customer to help keep that network efficient. The other thing is charging inside the cabinets. We could charge some batteries faster than others, but all that has implications on degradations and but they're all optimization points that could be dealt with, up improved, stuff like that.
And probably as your network increases, you also get network effects. And so you will be able to naturally optimize this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take one more question. Yeah, and this is true. You haven't really mentioned this. I think it's Mohammed asking this. What's the capacity of your batteries in volt or in kilowatt hours? And maybe I would add one question to this, like what can people do with a fully charged battery in terms of
in terms of like range? Yeah. So the batteries are 72 volt by 32 amp hours rated. So you're talking around about 2.3 kilowatt hours per battery. So you're at, what is it, 4.6 kilowatt hours, because we could take 2 batteries per bike. So on the motorcycle, let's say on a perfect driving condition, maybe you get to 130 kilometers. In reality, we think it's probably more like 100 kilometers, so 50 kilometers per battery pack. Yeah. And then in terms of on the backup use cases, it really depends on equipment, but like the inverter size that we think will work well is around 4,000 to 5,000 watts. One reason for that is most companies do not run their equipment baseload at 4,000 to 5,000 watts, but because a lot of equipment on the ground is quite old, it tends to have spikes when you start them. So your inverter has to get through that spike and then steady itself off. Yeah, so it means that you could run, depending, most customers are probably running at less than 300 watts of load. So you're talking, you know, per battery, I don't know what that is, 4, 6 hours, 7 hours, something like that.
Yeah, which is, unless you have a big party going on, more than enough to cover your lighting needs and
yeah, and TVs and small, yeah, or even sewing machines. People use them for that.
Well, thank you very much, Erik. We'll be very, very pleased to follow the further developments on your site. And I'm sure many of the listeners will also be getting in touch and keep a close eye on all the things you're doing in Ghana.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So you can reach out with whatever questions you have.
Yeah, we will share the questions. So we're going to close the session for today. But the people who are still with us now still have a few more minutes to submit their questions if they have any, and otherwise they will get your contact details because we will share your presentation as well. So definitely a lot of connections are going to happen after this event. Before I close, I just want to do a little bit of self-promotion. We have 2 very cool sets of events coming up in the next few months. First of all, we have our in-person conference, annual conference called REFA, Renewable Energy Forum Africa. It will be taking place in Nairobi this year. Last year, we did it in Cape Town. And it's really an event where financiers, investors meet with project developers and entrepreneurs to help fund ideas, project companies. And it's not only about solar energy, but it's really about all the renewable energy types. So we will have a day dedicated to green hydrogen, wind, hydro, electric mobility as well, and of course, solar and storage. So I hope many of you will be able to join this important event of the year. And meanwhile, over the summer, we are launching our Digital Solutions Summer Series. You see an example here with the company Open Solar. It will be a very short event, 30 minutes only, every Friday afternoon at 3. And every week we'll hear from a different company revolutionizing the world of digital in connection with solar. And believe me, there are some amazing solutions, amazing ideas out there. And I'm very, very excited to start the series. So I hope you will also find this interesting, and we will be sharing some registration details very soon. So this is it for me. I thank you very much. I'm just going to play video of our partners one more time. And I thank you for sharing your last minute comments and questions. And otherwise, I wish you an excellent rest of the day.
Okay, folks, well, as from the 3rd of January 2023, we have taken occupancy of this great new premises here in Somerset West. From a production point of view, we at the moment can handle around about 8 megawatt hours per month, but this facility as it stands here can quite easily go up to about 20 megawatt hours per month. And I think we'll scale into the sort of 10 megawatt hour per month capacity in the next sort of 3 to 6 months. And then by the end of 2023, I think we will be producing at a rate of about 20 megawatt hours per month. We have two very distinct product ranges. Our low voltage, or let's call it 50 volt series, 52 volt series of batteries manufactured underneath the mezzanine area. And then this whole area here, where I'm standing now and behind me, is all the high voltage batteries, which is typically 10 times higher voltage, so 520 volts. And that's where we manufacture our high power modules, which then form strings and then can go up to, we've recently deployed a 4.5 megawatt hour battery at Pall Mall, and we intend to deploy very shortly, 4, 5, 6 megawatt hour battery systems on single sites.
This concludes our 2-day online conference about storage. I wish you an excellent rest.